The blood from her cracked lips tasted like iron as Bonnie Walters trudged along the dusty trail leading into Timber Creek, clutching her 6-month-old daughter against her chest beneath a worn wool shawl. The Arizona Territory sun beat down mercilessly in the summer of 1878, making each step forward a battle against exhaustion and shame. Her once fine dress hung in tatters around her slim frame. The blue calico fabric faded from weeks on the road. "Hush now, Lily," she whispered as the baby stirred beneath the shawl. "We're almost there." But where there was, Bonnie hardly knew. At 19 years old, she'd been cast out by her family back in Missouri when they discovered her condition. The baby's father, a traveling salesman with pretty words and empty promises, had disappeared like morning dew once she told him about the child. 6 months of hiding her growing belly from judgmental eyes before fleeing west with barely enough money for the stagecoach ticket. Now, her funds exhausted and her options fewer than the clouds in the bright blue sky above, Bonnie approached the small frontier town with trepidation. She'd heard Timber Creek was growing, that there might be work for a woman willing to wash clothes or cook meals. Anything to feed her child. The first building she passed was the livery stable, its wide doors open to the afternoon heat. The smell of hay and horses drifted out, and Bonnie quickened her pace. She kept her head down as she passed a group of men lounging outside the saloon, their eyes following her ragged figure with interest. "Hey there, miss," one called out. "You look like you could use a drink." Bonnie clutched Lily tighter beneath the shawl, pressing the child closer to her chest to muffle any sounds she might make. The last thing she needed was for these men to know she carried a baby with no father in sight. Her footsteps quickened as she made her way toward what appeared to be a general store at the far end of the main street. Perhaps they might need help. Perhaps the storekeeper would be kind. The bell above the door jangled as she pushed it open, the cool interior a blessed relief from the heat outside. An older woman looked up from behind the counter, her eyes narrowing slightly as she took in Bonnie's disheveled appearance. "Can I help you, girl?" the woman asked, not unkindly, but with obvious suspicion. "I'm looking for work, madam," Bonnie said, her voice cracking from thirst. "Any kind of work." The woman seemed about to respond when Lily chose that moment to let out a small, mewling cry from beneath the shawl. The storekeeper's eyes hardened instantly. "We don't need help here," she said flatly. "Especially not from your sort." Bonnie backed toward the door, fighting tears. "Please, I best try elsewhere," the woman interrupted. "This is a respectable establishment." Back on the street, the heat seemed even more oppressive than before. Bonnie stood still for a moment, uncertain which direction to turn. Hunger gnawed at her belly, and her breasts ached with milk for her child. She hadn't eaten since yesterday noon, saving the last of her food for the baby. She continued down the street, approaching what appeared to be a small restaurant. Through the window, she could see several customers enjoying their meals. The thought of food made her dizzy with longing. Before she could reach the door, Lily began to cry in earnest, the sound impossible to muffle through the thin shawl. Panicked, Bonnie ducked into the narrow alley between the restaurant and the neighboring building, pressing herself against the rough wooden wall. "Shoo, please, Lily," she begged, glancing anxiously toward the street. "Please be quiet." She fumbled with her bodice, preparing to nurse the child to silence her cries, when a shadow fell across the alley entrance. A tall man stood there, silhouetted against the bright sunlight. Bonnie froze, instinctively turning to shield her baby from view. The man stepped into the alley, and Bonnie could see he wore the practical clothes of a rancher or cowboy, worn leather boots, dusty trousers, and a blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned, muscular forearms. A battered hat sat atop his head, shadowing features that seemed youthful despite the weathering of sun and wind. "Madam, are you all right?" His voice was deep but gentle, lacking the harsh edge she'd come to expect from strangers. Bonnie pressed herself further against the wall, shame burning her cheeks. Lily continued to cry, the sound growing more insistent. "I'm fine," she said quickly. "Please just leave us be." Instead of leaving, the man took another step forward. "You don't sound fine," he observed. "And I don't reckon that little one's fine either." Before Bonnie could react, he reached out and gently lifted the edge of the shawl, revealing Lily's red, tear-streaked face. Bonnie gasped, clutching the baby tighter. "Please," she whispered, "don't call the sheriff. We're not causing trouble. We'll move on." The man's expression softened as he looked at the infant, then back to Bonnie's terrified face. Without a word, he reached out and carefully lifted the child from her arms. Bonnie made a strangled sound of protest, but her legs were too weak from hunger and exhaustion to lunge for her baby. To her surprise, the man held Lily with practiced ease, cradling her against his broad chest. "You're mine now, too," he said softly to the baby, before looking up at Bonnie with clear blue eyes. "Both of you." Bonnie stared at him in confusion. "What?" "Name's Quinn Vaughn," he said simply. "I own the Double V Ranch about 5 miles outside of town. Got plenty of room, plenty of food, and could use some help around the place." He paused, rocking Lily gently as her cries subsided to hiccuping sobs. "No questions asked about the past. Why would you help us?" Bonnie asked, suspicion warring with desperate hope. Quinn's eyes clouded briefly. "Because someone once helped me when I needed it most." He handed Lily back to Bonnie, who took the child with trembling hands. "My wagon's out front. Come with me, or don't, your choice. But that little one needs milk, and you look about ready to fall over." Bonnie hesitated only a moment before nodding. What choice did she have? And something in this man's steady gaze told her he could be trusted. "I'm Bonnie," she said softly. "Bonnie Walters. And this is Lily." Quinn nodded, a small smile touching his lips. "Miss Walters. Little Miss Lily." He gestured toward the street. "Let's get you both home." The wagon ride to the Double V Ranch passed in a blur for Bonnie. Quinn had given her a canteen of water and some jerky from his saddlebags, which she consumed gratefully, while Lily slept against her chest. The baby seemed to sense the change in their fortunes. Her tiny features relaxed in sleep for the first time in days. Quinn didn't press her with questions, for which Bonnie was deeply thankful. He spoke instead of practical matters, how his ranch ran cattle and horses, how the main house had several empty bedrooms, how his cook, Mrs. Flores, would be pleased to have another woman around the place. As the wagon crested a small rise, Bonnie got her first view of what Quinn called home. The Double V was larger than she'd imagined, with a sprawling main house built of sturdy timber and stone, a large barn, several outbuildings, and corrals filled with horses. In the distance, she could see cattle grazing on the rolling grassland that stretched to the mountains on the horizon. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Quinn glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "It's home. Mrs. Flores," a plump Mexican woman with a stern face that belied her kind eyes, took one look at Bonnie and Lily and immediately set about preparing a hot bath and meal. Within hours, Bonnie found herself clean, fed, and settled in a comfortable bedroom with a small cradle that Quinn had carried down from the attic. "It was mine," he explained simply when she asked about it. "My mother saved it." Over the next few days, Bonnie gradually regained her strength. Mrs. Flores taught her the rhythms of the ranch house when meals were served, how Quinn liked his coffee, which ranch hands ate at the main house, and which at the bunkhouse. Bonnie insisted on helping with chores despite Mrs. Flores's protests, needing to feel useful, to earn her keep. Quinn himself was often busy with ranch work, leaving before dawn and returning tired at dusk. But each evening, he would take time to sit with Bonnie on the wide front porch, asking after her day and especially about Lily. To Bonnie's surprise, the tough cowboy had a remarkable tenderness with the baby, holding her with confident hands and talking to her as if she understood every word. "You're good with her," Bonnie observed one evening about 2 weeks after their arrival. The sunset painted the mountains gold and pink, and a cool breeze stirred the cottonwood trees that surrounded the house. Quinn smiled, tickling Lily's chin as she gurgled happily on his lap. Had some practice. My sister has 3 little ones over in Santa Fe. Will you tell me why you really helped us? Bonnie asked suddenly. The question had been burning inside her since that first day. Quinn was quiet for a long moment, his fingers still playing with Lily's tiny hands. My mother was like you, he finally said. Young, alone with a child. My father died before I was born, thrown from a horse. She was 18, pregnant, and suddenly a widow on the frontier. He looked up at Bonnie, his eyes reflecting the fading light. A rancher took her in, gave her a job as his housekeeper. Later, they fell in love and married. He raised me as his own son, taught me everything I know about ranching, about being a man. When he died 5 years ago, he left this place to me. So you're paying forward a kindness, Bonnie said softly. Quinn nodded. Something like that. As the weeks passed, Bonnie found herself settling into life at the Double V with surprising ease. The ranch hands, initially wary of the young woman and her baby, gradually accepted her presence, tipping their hats respectfully when they saw her and occasionally bringing small gifts for Lily, a carved wooden horse, a pretty stone, a handkerchief embroidered by a sister or wife. Only one hand, a surly man named Foster, made Bonnie uncomfortable with his lingering looks and barely disguised contempt. She avoided him when possible and made sure never to be alone when he was nearby. Quinn noticed, of course. Foster giving you trouble? He asked casually one evening as they sat on the porch. Bonnie hesitated. Not exactly. He just looks at me sometimes, like he's figuring something. The next day, Foster was gone, paid off, and sent on his way. Quinn never mentioned it, and Bonnie didn't ask. Summer faded into fall, and the cottonwoods around the house turned brilliant gold. Lily grew plumper and more active, learning to sit up and reaching for Quinn whenever he entered the room. Bonnie watched their bond grow with a mixture of gratitude and something more complex that she wasn't ready to name. One crisp October morning, Quinn found Bonnie in the kitchen, helping Mrs. Flores prepare breakfast for the hands. Ride with me today, he said, leaning against the doorframe. I want to show you something. Mrs. Flores made a shooing motion. Go, go. I watched the Nina. An hour later, Bonnie found herself on horseback for the first time in years, following Quinn along a narrow trail that wound up into the foothills beyond the ranch. She rode side saddle on a gentle mare named Daisy, her skirts arranged modestly around her. You ride well, Quinn observed as they climbed higher. Bonnie smiled. My father raised horses back in Missouri. Before. She trailed off, the familiar shame rising. Quinn didn't press, just nodded and led on. Finally, they reached a small plateau overlooking the valley below. The Double V spread out beneath them, peaceful and prosperous in the autumn sunlight. This is my thinking spot, Quinn said, dismounting and helping Bonnie down from her horse. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, and Bonnie felt heat rise to her cheeks. They stood together at the edge of the plateau, the wind tugging at Bonnie's hair as she gazed out at the view. It's like looking at a painting, she murmured. Bonnie, Quinn said, his voice suddenly serious. You've been here almost 3 months now. Her heart sank. Was this it? Was he going to ask her to leave? I've been thinking, he continued, turning to face her. You and Lily. You've brought something to this place that was missing. Life. Warmth. He took a deep breath. I don't want you to feel obligated to stay out of gratitude. But I wanted you to know that I'd like it very much if you did. Stay, that is. Bonnie looked up at him. This man who had saved her and Lily from desperation, who had asked no questions about her past, who treated her baby as if she were his own flesh and blood. Are you offering me a permanent position? She asked carefully. As your housekeeper? Quinn shook his head, a small smile playing at his lips. No, Miss Walters. Though, if that's what you want, the job is yours. He took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. I'm offering you a home. For as long as you want it. Bonnie's breath caught. Quinn. I'm not proposing marriage, he added quickly. Not yet. That would be too fast, wouldn't it? But I wanted you to know that the possibility exists. That I care for you. And for Lily. His blue eyes held hers steadily. I think I could love you both very much, given time. Tears welled in Bonnie's eyes. You don't know about my past. About Lily's father. I know enough, Quinn said simply. I know you're strong and kind and brave. I know you're a good mother. The rest. Well, the rest is just the road that brought you here. Impulsively, Bonnie rose on her tiptoes and pressed a soft kiss to Quinn's cheek. Thank you, she whispered. His arms slipped around her waist, holding her close as they looked out over the valley together. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Bonnie felt hope unfurling inside her like a flower reaching for the sun. Winter came early that year, blanketing the ranch in snow by mid-November. The cold brought everyone closer together, with long evenings spent around the fireplace in the main house. Quinn read aloud from books while Bonnie sewed or mended, and Lily played on a blanket near the hearth, growing stronger and more curious every day. The first time Lily called Quinn Bonnie froze, her needle halfway through a stitch. Quinn looked up from his book, his expression a mixture of surprise and something that looked suspiciously like joy. She doesn't understand, Bonnie said quickly. She's just making sounds. Quinn set his book aside and went to scoop up the baby, who reached for him eagerly. Maybe, he said, bouncing Lily gently in his arms. But I don't mind it. Their first kiss came on Christmas Eve, after the hands had returned to the bunkhouse and Mrs. Flores had retired to her room. They stood together beneath a sprig of mistletoe that Quinn had hung in the doorway between the parlor and dining room, Bonnie blushing as Quinn pointed upward with a mischievous smile. It's tradition, he murmured, leaning down to brush his lips against hers. What began as a gentle touch deepened into something more, and when they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. Quinn rested his forehead against hers, his hands warm at her waist. Merry Christmas, Bonnie Walters, he whispered. Merry Christmas, Quinn Vaughn, she replied, her heart so full she thought it might burst. As winter thawed into spring, their relationship blossomed like the wildflowers that carpeted the hills around the ranch. Quinn courted Bonnie properly with chaperone rides into town, picnics by the creek when the weather allowed, and small gifts that showed how well he was coming to know her: a book of poetry, a silver hairpin, a bottle of lavender water from the general store. Through it all, Lily grew and thrived, taking her first steps across the porch one sunny April afternoon, both Bonnie and Quinn cheering her on. In these moments, they felt like a family already, bound by something stronger than blood or law. But shadows from the past had a way of finding even the brightest present. The letter arrived in early May, delivered by a rider from town. It was addressed to Miss Bonnie Walters, care of Double V Ranch, in a flowing script that Bonnie recognized instantly. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal, Quinn watching with concern from across the kitchen table where they'd been eating lunch. What is it? He asked softly. Bonnie scanned the pages, her face growing paler with each line. It's from my mother, she whispered. My father has died. And she looked up, her eyes wide with shock. And Edward, Lily's father, he's in Missouri. He's been looking for us. Quinn's expression hardened. Why? He claims he wants to make things right. To marry me. Bonnie's voice was hollow. My mother says he's been to see them, that he seems sincere in his regret. Do you believe that? Quinn asked carefully. Bonnie set the letter down. I don't know. He abandoned me when I told him about the baby. Said he wasn't ready for a family, that it would ruin his prospects. The old pain and shame washed over her. He was so cruel, Quinn. The things he said. Quinn reached across the table, taking her hand in his. You don't have to see him. You don't owe him anything. But Lily, Bonnie whispered. He's her father. No, Quinn said firmly. Being a father is more than just blood. It's being there every day. It's loving a child even when it's hard, even when you're tired or frustrated. It's putting that child's needs above your own. His blue eyes blazed with emotion. I've been more of a father to Lily in these past months than he has in her entire life. Bonnie knew he was right. Still, the letter had opened old wounds, reminded her of the scandal that had driven her from her home, the whispers and stares that had followed her growing belly. What if Edward came looking for them? What if he had legal rights to Lily that could tear their newfound happiness apart? Quinn seemed to read her thoughts. Write to your mother, he said gently. Tell her where you are, that you're safe and well. But make it clear that you don't wish to see Edward. He squeezed her hand. And then, Bonnie Walters, if you're willing, I think it's time we made this arrangement of ours permanent. Her eyes widened. Quinn. He stood, coming around the table to kneel beside her chair. I was going to wait until Sunday, do this properly with a ring and all. But now seems like the right time. He took both her hands in his. I love you, Bonnie. I love Lily, as if she were my own daughter. I want us to be a family in name as well as in heart. Tears spilled down Bonnie's cheeks. Are you sure? Even with all this? She gestured at the letter. Even knowing another man might come looking for us? Quinn's jaw set determinedly. Let him come. You and Lily are mine now if you'll have me. No one's going to change that. Bonnie threw her arms around his neck, nearly knocking him over. Yes, she whispered against his ear. Yes, Quinn Vaughn, I'll marry you. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Timber Creek, with Mrs. Flores, the ranch hands, and a few townspeople as witnesses. Bonnie wore a new dress of pale blue silk that Quinn had ordered specially from Tucson, with Lily toddling beside her in a matching ribbon. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Quinn scooped Lily up in one arm and kissed Bonnie with the other, to cheers and applause from the assembled guests. The celebration at the ranch afterward lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing in the yard under strings of lanterns. As the night grew late, Quinn found Bonnie sitting on the porch steps, watching the festivities with a contented smile. Happy, Mrs. Vaughn? He asked, settling beside her. More than I ever thought possible, she admitted, leaning against his shoulder. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as one of the younger hands attempted to teach Mrs. Flores a new dance step, both of them laughing. I wrote to my mother, Bonnie said finally. Told her I was getting married, that Lily and I were safe and happy. Quinn nodded. Good. I also told her about Edward. Bonnie's voice grew stronger. I told her that if he truly wanted to make amends, he could do so by leaving us alone. That Lily has a father now who loves her completely. Quinn's arm tightened around her waist. You're an extraordinary woman, Bonnie Vaughn. She smiled up at him. I had to become one. For Lily. And now for you. Their kiss was interrupted by a small body colliding with their legs as Lily, tired but still excited by the party, climbed into their laps. Duh. Ma, she exclaimed, her vocabulary expanding daily. Quinn laughed, lifting her up to sit between them. That's right, little one. Ma, and Bonnie looked at her daughter's face, flushed with happiness, and at her husband's eyes, filled with love for them both. The shame that had followed her for so long seemed to lift completely, like morning mist burned away by the sun. 3 months into their marriage, Edward Carlyle arrived in Timber Creek. He came not with legal papers or threats, but with a letter of apology and a trunk full of expensive gifts for the daughter he'd never met. Quinn met him at the door of the ranch house, his stance protective but not hostile. She's married now, Quinn said simply. We're a family, Edward, a slender man with fashionable clothes and a carefully trimmed mustache, nodded slowly. I understand. I don't want to cause trouble. He hesitated. I just wanted to see that they're well, to try to make some amends. Bonnie appeared in the doorway behind Quinn, her hand resting lightly on her husband's arm. Hello, Edward. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of her, no longer the frightened, desperate girl he'd abandoned, but a confident woman with clear eyes and steady hands.
Bonnie.
You look well. I am well, she confirmed. After a moment's hesitation, she added, Would you like to meet your daughter? The meeting was brief and somewhat awkward, with Lily shy around the stranger despite his attempts to win her over with a porcelain doll from his trunk of gifts. She kept returning to Quinn, reaching up with small hands until he lifted her into his arms, where she nestled contentedly against his chest. Edward watched them with a complicated expression. She clearly knows who her father is, he said finally, his voice quiet. Quinn has been her father in every way that matters, Bonnie replied, her tone gentle but firm. After Edward left, promising to respect their family, but asking permission to send birthday and Christmas gifts to Lily in the future, Bonnie found Quinn in the barn, aggressively mucking out stalls. Are you angry? She asked, leaning against the door frame. Quinn paused, leaning on his pitchfork. Not angry, just. He shook his head. Seeing him with Lily, knowing he could have had what I have now if he'd been a better man, it stirred something up. Bonnie crossed to him, taking the pitchfork from his hands and setting it aside. If he'd been a better man, I wouldn't have you, she said simply. We wouldn't have this life. She stood on tiptoe to kiss him softly. Everything happened exactly as it needed to for us to find each other. Quinn's arms came around her, holding her close. You're right, as usual, he murmured against her hair. I'm a lucky man, Bonnie Vaughn. And I'm a lucky woman. She pulled back slightly, a small, secret smile playing at her lips. And about to be luckier still. His eyebrows rose questioningly. Dr. Mason confirmed it yesterday, Bonnie said, taking his hand and placing it gently against her still flat stomach. We'll have a new edition come spring. Joy blazed across Quinn's face. A baby? We're having a baby? Bonnie nodded, laughing as he lifted her off her feet in an exuberant embrace, spinning her around the barn. Careful. She gasped through her laughter. I'm in a delicate condition, remember? He set her down gently, his hands still at her waist, his expression suddenly serious. I love you, Bonnie Vaughn. You and Lily, and this new little one, you're the best things that ever happened to me. And you're the best thing that ever happened to us, she replied softly. That day in town, when I had nothing left. You lifted more than just my baby that day, Quinn. You lifted my whole life. As they walked back to the house hand in hand, the setting sun gilding the mountains in gold and crimson, Bonnie reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From shame and desperation to love and belonging, from hiding her child beneath a shawl to proudly building a family with a man who saw beyond her mistakes to the woman she could become. The path hadn't been easy or straight, but standing here now, with Quinn's hand warm in hers and their future bright before them, Bonnie knew with absolute certainty that every step had been leading her home.